Okay. A number of years ago, I stumbled upon Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
as at that time, I was at a point in my life where I felt, life wasn't actually treating me well the way I wanted it to treat me, and
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't getting ahead as I should get ahead. And then prior to that time, I had heard about the concept of finding a meaning, but I hadn't looked into it deeply until when I read the book, and then I saw all what Frankie went through, the horrors of Second World War, and
Yeah,
how he came
that's
out
it.
of it, and yeah, and how he came out of it, and you know, and the profound observations he made as regards why meaning is important, and how people had a meaning even in prison camps,
Mm-hmm.
found a way to survive the prison camp and the humiliations and the suffering. So that was one book that really, turned my life around in terms of purpose or as regards the subject. Then another book I read that actually affected me was a book by it's called the Power of. I've forgotten the name of the author right now. No, okay, it's Richard J. Leida, somebody like that. It's the title of the book is The Power of Purpose, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
he spoke a lot about why purpose is important, and he gave an insight into a study in which was done, and older folks were asked that if they were to do life again, what were some of the things that will make sure they did well. And one of the things that kept coming up was, they kept saying they'll make sure they live the life of purpose earlier. And I felt, I was young, so why not begin to live it earlier now? So
True,
those are some of
true,
the two books that.
true. And and I think it's beyond coincidental that we share one of those books as well. I read Viktor Frankl as well, and that made a tremendous change in my life, understanding that the life has a lot to do with, well, tragedy and suffering, like he went through. And his story is a remarkable one. World War II, he was imprisoned in wood camps and all those things. And when all the aspects of human nature was taken away from him, he said something similar to this. He said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that small space is our ability to choose our response, and in that ability comes our freedom. And that was beautiful. That line, that I just held to that line, and I realized that I can choose what I want to do with my life. And that's very important when you understand the difference between being the narrator or being the narrative, because the narrator is the one writing the narrative. Because we have a lot of persons, especially in cross culturally, they believe that they're the narrative, they believe that they are the story. But what Viktor Frankl was saying, despite of all what that was happening to him, he was not the story. He was the narrator in the story, and he could choose to write. He could choose to write whatever he wants to write. It's how he responds to the stimulus that was important, and not the stimulus in itself. And I think when I look into myself, I find like I was living a life that I was only viewing myself as the story that I was told, where I was born, where I came from. And philosophers call that throughness. You do not have the control over where you were born or the family you were born into. What you have control over is how you take the situation and how you make something best out of the situation. And that book, Viktor Frankl, was it was a mindset changer for me to find out there is meaning in life. There is meaning in life, and I try to find the meaning in life and just coincide with purpose itself. And that's why the title of my book is The Meaning of Life. The subtitle is The Meaning of Life is Found in the Purpose to Live. And that was highly inspired by that as well. And my second book that I really appreciate was Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. His first habit is having an end in mind. You must have an end in mind. It's almost like it's a different way to say purpose. You must know what you're going to do in order for you to work towards doing it. And when you have that, when you work towards it in that manner, you have what's called incremental progress, and you feel good about your progress. Those two books were brilliant for me. But I find it's very coincidental, you could see, that we share one of those books as well.
Yeah, No, that's awesome. I one of the things that pushed me to begin to explore, as regards the subject of purpose, was the concept of human suffering.
Mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm,
was the human suffering. We live in a world that seems as if we are helpless. That seems as if that beyond what we can perform, or beyond what we are capable of doing, there are forces that goes beyond what we cannot control. And I felt, that there has to be some level, or some way in which we can be able to control our lives and
mm-hmm,
find meaning or create meaning despite the suffering. Okay, so
mm-hmm,
when I read Frankie's book, and I saw how despite the suffering, he still found meaning or created meaning, as you said, that between response, that there's a gap between response and I've forgotten it now, that the
stimulus.
ability to make
Yeah.
response and stimulus, that your ability to make that decision is what gives you the power, okay,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the suffering. So I think that's very important.